Her son listed her as deceased to cash in her benefits. Dorothy Bell, 68, was breathing and furious. Marcus, her only child, sat at the audit certain his lie would hold. Then the door opened. She stepped in with her ID, her lawyer, and the truth, and his perfect fraud shattered in seconds. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The letter came in a pale blue envelope, wedged between a supermarket circular and a credit card offer. Dorothy Bell didn't open it right away. She was halfway through her morning routine, one shoe on, oatmeal cooling by the window, her cat Annie circling her ankles in protest of a late breakfast. Only when she went to refill her pillbox did she remember it. Medicare. She slit the envelope with a butter knife. The paper inside was thin, government standard. Coverage denied. Beneficiary is listed as deceased. Dorothy stared at the words like they were written in a language she didn't know. Then she read them again. And again. Deceased? The oatmeal was stone cold by the time she sat down at her kitchen table. She called the number printed in the top right corner of the letter. The hold music was soft jazz, the kind that made her teeth itch. When someone finally picked up, the agent's tone was bright but distracted. Full name and date of birth? Dorothy Louise Bell, June 12, 1957. A pause. Typing. Then a longer pause. Ms. Bell, I'm seeing here… Another pause. This record shows you as deceased, actually. Date of death was entered as March 17th. Dorothy's mouth opened, then closed. Well, that's news to me, she said. I just made coffee and fed my cat. Pretty lively for a corpse. I understand this is distressing, the agent said, in a voice that suggested she didn't. You'll need to visit your local Social Security Administration office in person to dispute the record. Dorothy scribbled the address down with a shaky hand. Thank you, she said flatly, and hung up. At the SSA office, the air smelled like plastic chairs and forgotten time. She waited nearly 40 minutes before being called to a window manned by a balding man with a purple tie and a nameplate that read D. Tompkins. He typed her information in, squinting at the screen. Ma'am, I'm afraid this confirms what Medicare told you. Our system lists you as deceased, officially. There's even a death certificate filed, copy uploaded to our database. Dorothy felt something tilt in her chest. You're telling me I've died? While standing right here in front of you? I can't change this manually. You'll need to file a request for correction. But it'll take time. How much time? A few weeks at best. Dorothy pressed her fingers into the counter, trying to stay grounded. Someone filed that certificate, she said. Someone declared me dead. Who? He hesitated. Privacy rules limit what I can share, but the name on the survivor's benefit claim is Marcus Bell, her son. Dorothy's vision narrowed, tunnel-like. For a moment, she wasn't in the fluorescent-lit office. She was back in that hospital room when Marcus was born, the first time she held him, his whole life in front of him. Now he was burying hers. Back home, she found Joyce Richmond outside, watering her begonias in a pink robe that had seen better decades. You all right, Dorothy? You look pale, Dorothy told her. Joyce's eyebrows shot up. Deceased? Well, that explains it. Explains what? I've seen some weird mail in your box. Estate of Dorothy Bell, it said. I thought it was just a clerical thing, but now? She shook her head. That boy of yours has been too quiet. Haven't seen him around in months. Dorothy blinked hard against the sun. I need to make a call. Tina Bell answered on the third ring, her voice flat and guarded. Dorothy? Did Marcus tell you I was dead? A long pause, then a quiet, no. Another beat. But there's been stuff. Mail, papers. I didn't understand it and I didn't ask. Dorothy swallowed the lump in her throat. I'm alive, Tina, and someone is cashing in on me being otherwise. Tina sighed. I'll get the mail he left here. You should see it. That night, Dorothy sat at her kitchen table again, the letter from Medicare beside her, the remains of dinner untouched. The world was still. Too still. She looked at the window, her reflection dim in the glass. He didn't kill me, she whispered, but he buried me on paper. Outside, headlights pulled into a driveway down the street. Dorothy didn't notice. She was already making a list of questions, of names, and of the life she planned to take back. The conference room on the third floor of the pro bono legal clinic had mismatched chairs and the sharp scent of copier toner. Dorothy adjusted the sleeves of her cardigan, trying not to fidget. The folder in her lap was thin but heavy. It held her Medicare denial, scribbled notes, and a printout of her supposed death. Across the table sat Dana Perez, late 30s, angular frame, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that didn't blink often. Her navy blazer was too crisp for this office, and the way she thumbed through Dorothy's documents said she wasn't just some lawyer who took on lost causes. She was someone who hated liars. "You brought everything?" Dana asked, not looking up. Dorothy nodded and slid the folder forward. "They told me my son claimed I was dead, that he filed for benefits, my name, my accounts." Dana opened the folder and skimmed quickly. Her lips thinned as she read the SSA letter. "You're sure this is your son?" Dorothy hesitated. "Yes, Marcus Bell, my only child." Dana tapped the table twice, decisive. "Then let's start here." She stood and crossed to her laptop, typing with precision. "I'm pulling federal claims tied to your Social Security number and pension ID." Dorothy watched the screen reflected in Dana's glasses. Rows of data blinked to life, then froze. "There." Dana's voice darkened. "Filed March 18th, survivor status, the day after your so-called death." She spun the laptop toward Dorothy. "Application date, March 18th. Claimant, Marcus T. Bell. Relation to deceased son. Status, approved, funds released. Attached file, death certificate dbell.pdf." Dorothy stared at it, bile rising. He didn't just lie, he forged it. Dana opened the attachment. The death certificate was official-looking, but sloppy. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest, cremation noted, no funeral home contact, no hospital. The signature block bore a physician's name Dorothy didn't recognize. Dana zoomed in. "This isn't just fraud, it's federal identity theft, and whoever helped him with this knew exactly which buttons to push." "Why didn't I see any notices?" Dorothy asked, her voice cracking. "Because your account access was rerouted," Dana replied. "Address changes, online login updates, even phone numbers, all modified 6 months ago. He's been inside your accounts for half a year." Dorothy's fingers clenched around her purse strap. Dana was already moving, opening a second file, starting a formal fraud notification. "I'm flagging this with the SSA and your pension board. You'll be listed as compromised identity status until this is resolved. We'll file an injunction to freeze any further disbursements." "I never even knew you could do this to someone," Dorothy said softly. Dana didn't look up. "Most people don't. That's why it works." A silence settled over the room. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights and the clicking of Dana's keys. Then, "You're lucky you caught this when you did. If it had gone a few more months, he could have moved the money out of reach." Dorothy's eyes narrowed. "He stole my death and turned it into a payday." Dana met her gaze for the first time. "Not anymore." Outside, the early spring wind bit through Dorothy's coat as she waited for the bus. The trees were still bare, skeletal against the afternoon sky. She pulled her scarf tighter, feeling like a ghost among the living. Joyce was waiting for her on the porch when she returned. "How'd it go?" she asked, stepping aside to let Dorothy through the gate. Dorothy dropped her bag inside the door and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. "She's good, sharp as a knife, filing fraud notices already." Joyce handed her a cup of tea she hadn't asked for. "You got time," she said, "but now you need teeth." Dorothy nodded slowly, the steam curling around her face. "Then it's time I learned how to bite." That night, as Dorothy settled into bed, a thought took root and wouldn't let go. Marcus hadn't just erased her on paper. He had weaponized her name, her trust, her entire identity, and someone had helped him do it. She reached over and opened the drawer beside her bed, pulling out an old photo. Marcus at 10, grinning with 2 missing teeth, arm around a stray dog they'd rescued for one summer. That boy had vanished long ago. Her lawyer would chase the paper trail, But Dorothy Bell? She was about to start hunting the men behind the curtain. The obituary wasn't even well written. Dorothy found it at 2:13 a.m., lit only by the pale glow of her laptop. She'd been scouring the internet for anything with her name on it. Public records, property searches, even death notices. A strange impulse had driven her to check. What she saw made her stop breathing. Dorothy L. Bell, 68, of Albany, passed peacefully on March 17th after a long battle with heart complications. A retired school librarian and beloved member of her community, she leaves behind her son Marcus Bell. Services were private as per her wishes. There was a stock photo of a sunset, the kind you use when there's no funeral photo to post. Her hands trembled as she clicked the source. AlbanyLegacyTributes.com, a free memorial site often used for small, private obituaries. The user who submitted it had been anonymized. But Dorothy didn't need a name. She closed the laptop and sat back, eyes fixed on the darkness outside her bedroom window. She wasn't just dead in the government's eyes. She'd been buried, publicly. By mid-morning, Dana had printed out the obituary and pinned it to her office corkboard. "Low effort," she muttered, circling the language with a red pen. "No funeral home, no service location, no verifiable contact info. This reads like someone trying to check a box." She looked up at Dorothy. "This is how he opened the probate." Dorothy blinked. "What probate?" "Marcus filed with the county probate court claiming you had no will, no next of kin, and left unclaimed pension assets. The obituary helped him establish your death for the court. He submitted it with the forged certificate." Dorothy clenched her jaw. "He knows damn well I wrote a will." Dana nodded grimly. "He didn't submit that part. And since no one contested it, because you were supposedly dead, the court began the disbursement process." She turned to her computer and pulled up an asset seizure form. "I'm filing for full restitution and injunction today. We'll freeze any pending pension funds he hasn't already moved." "Will we get it back?" Dorothy asked. Dana didn't answer. Not directly. The next knock at Dorothy's door came from Tina. She stood on the porch in a thick sweater, holding a manila folder. "I printed the obituary," she said, "from the link Marcus left on his Facebook. I didn't believe it when I saw it, but I didn't say anything." Dorothy stepped aside silently, letting her in. "I wasn't sure what was real," Tina continued. "He said you didn't want a service, that you'd made peace with dying alone. It sounded like something he'd say, not you." Dorothy took the folder and didn't open it. "You could have called me." "I should have," Tina whispered, "but I didn't want to get involved. I thought if it wasn't true, someone else would speak up." No one did. They sat in silence for a moment, the unspoken weight of omission thick in the room. Then Tina added, "You need to check your life insurance too. He mentioned something about it, said it was already done. Whatever that means." Back in Dana's office, the discovery came fast and sharp. "He did it," Dana said, flipping her monitor around. $3,000 withdrawal from your life insurance policy. Not the main benefit, but a rider payout. Accidental coverage refund. He probably thought no one would notice. Dorothy narrowed her eyes. "Did he sign for it?" Dana smiled, cold and calculated. "Digitally, with an IP address I'm about to trace." Then she picked up the phone. "It's time we got the feds involved." Wendell Price didn't smile when he arrived. He didn't shake hands, didn't offer pleasantries. He carried a hardback briefcase and wore a charcoal gray suit that had seen more courtrooms than cafes. "Ms. Bell," he said flatly, "I've been assigned by the Office of the Inspector General to conduct an internal audit related to your identity case. SSA, pension, and insurance theft. 3 federal layers. That's enough to open a full probe." Dana nodded once. "We've got proof of forged death records, improper benefit claims, and third-party access manipulation. We're compiling timelines now." Wendell didn't flinch. "Compile fast. Once we notify the Department of Treasury, asset movement becomes traceable." Dorothy watched him carefully. He didn't seem warm, but he was thorough. She could work with thorough. Wendell tapped a thin folder on the table. "I've seen dead people rise in paperwork before, but this is deliberate, sustained, organized." Dorothy lifted her chin. "And personal." He met her gaze evenly. Let's see how long his paper empire stands. That night, Dorothy sat by her kitchen window again. The obituary was still open on her laptop, the lie printed in neat black letters. But now she had names, movements, a file with Dana, a federal auditor in her corner. Her son hadn't just stolen her death, he'd dared to write her legacy, and now she was going to burn every word of it down. The kitchen table hadn't seen this much action since Marcus was a teenager, back when it had been covered in science fair trifolds and late-night algebra homework. Now it was stacked with proof-of-life materials, CVS receipts, a recent optometrist's report, bank statements, library checkout slips, even a selfie Joyce had taken of them at a winter fundraiser. Dorothy sifted through it all carefully, her fingers steady despite the mounting pressure. Dana sat across from her, methodically organizing the papers into labeled folders. Her suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up, hair in a practical twist. Every so often she would glance at her laptop, where the audit calendar glared in red. 3 days. Dorothy slid a photo across the table, one from Christmas, blurry and warm. This was taken 4 months after he said I died. Dana didn't smile, but she nodded approvingly. Perfect, time-stamped. That's one of the best pieces we've got. Dorothy hesitated. What if it's not enough? Dana's fingers stopped. It will be. Outside, Joyce leaned over the gate in her worn cardigan, arms folded tightly. He know yet? She asked when Dorothy stepped out to toss some mail. Not officially, Dorothy said, voice low. Joyce raised an eyebrow. Then let him walk into the trap, alive and well, and waiting. She pulled a cigarette from her sweater pocket but didn't light it, just held it like a relic from another life. This is the part where he still thinks he's the smartest one in the room. Dorothy managed a tired smile. That won't last long. 2 zip codes away, in a basement apartment that smelled faintly of mildew and body spray, Marcus Bell leaned back on his couch and popped the tab on a warm beer. Relax, Derek Wolfe said, pacing behind him. He had a Bluetooth headset in one ear and a fast-talking voice like he was used to dodging questions. You filed it clean. You got the payout. Just play it cool. Nobody's coming for anything. Marcus laughed, bitter and confident. It's been 6 months. No knock on the door, no letters, no heat. That money's mine now. Exactly, Derek said. Just keep your story straight. If anything happens, it's probate clerical. Nobody goes to jail over a typo. But even as Derek spoke, his eyes drifted toward the door, uneasy. Back at the legal clinic, Dana pinned a full timeline to the corkboard. March 17th, official date of death. March 18th, survivor claim filed. April 3rd, pension disbursement initiated. May 11th, life insurance rider withdrawn. August 3rd, Dorothy receives Medicare denial. She connected the dots with red thread like it was a crime scene. In a way, it was. We need testimony from at least 2 non-relatives confirming you were alive during that period, she said, ticking boxes on a form. Joyce can do it, so can Dr. Franklin. He did my physical in May. Perfect, Dana said. You'll be entering the building first, quietly. We'll wait until Marcus has finished making his false statements. Then we walk in with this. She gestured toward the files, the photos, the living, breathing evidence. And introduce the inconvenient truth. Dorothy looked at the board, the trail of red leading from one stolen document to the next. Do I have to speak? Not if you don't want to, but when you show up alive in front of a federal auditor, that'll speak louder than anything I say. That night, Dorothy sat in bed, the old family photo album on her lap. Not the digital scans. The real thing. Cracked vinyl and sticky pages. She paused on one photo. Marcus, 8 years old, wearing a Halloween cape and fake vampire teeth, holding her hand like she was the only anchor he had in the world. She touched the corner of the picture. You used to be mine, she whispered. Now I'm nobody to you but a check. The rage wasn't loud anymore. It had cooled into something heavier, something sharper. 3 days. That's all that stood between her and the audit. And on the other side of that table, her son would be sitting across from the federal government, ready to lie his way to safety. He didn't know it yet, but this time his mother would be waiting for him. Alive. documented, and legally armed. The federal building on Broadway looked more like a mausoleum than a government office: concrete walls, narrow windows, and a flag that didn't move even when the wind picked up. The kind of place where truth got boiled down into forms, boxes, and codes. Marcus Bell walked through the double doors like a man clocking into a boring job, calm, clean-shaven, wearing a navy sport coat he hadn't bothered to iron. He held nothing in his hands. He didn't need to. In his mind, the lie had already been lived in. Derek Wolfe trailed behind him, clutching a manila folder thick with fabricated forms, fake notary stamps, and half-truths. He wore a forced grin that didn't touch his eyes. "Just follow my lead," Marcus muttered as they approached the reception desk. "It's just a review." Derek said nothing. Room 3B was colder than Marcus expected. A long oak table sat under buzzing fluorescents. A water pitcher and a digital recorder sat centered, untouched. On one side sat Wendell Price, flanked by 2 administrative officers and a laptop open to the SSA portal. Wendell didn't smile when Marcus entered. He simply gestured to the empty chairs. "Mr. Bell, Mr. Wolfe, please be seated. This is a preliminary fraud audit relating to SSA Survivor Benefits Claim number 11873-B. You've been summoned to clarify your submissions and the origin of documentation tied to that claim." Marcus gave a polite nod and sat. He adjusted his cuffs like he was settling in for a job interview. "Happy to help clear things up," he said smoothly. Wendell didn't look up from his screen. "Let's start with the death certificate." Derek slid a copy forward. Marcus leaned back, feigning composure. "It was a rough time," he said. "My mother, Dorothy Bell, passed unexpectedly. No hospital, just heart failure in her sleep. She'd been distant for years. Estranged, really. We honored her wish to keep it private. No funeral. Cremation." Wendell lifted his eyes slowly. "And where was the cremation performed?" Marcus hesitated, then gave a name. Pine Hill Memorial, a shuttered funeral home Derek had used on old filings. "And the attending physician?" Dr. Hargrove," Marcus said, voice tightening ever so slightly. Wendell typed quietly, then stopped. "There's no record of a Dr. Hargrove licensed in the state of New York in the last 5 years. Marcus blinked. Before he could speak, the door behind Wendell opened. Dana Perez stepped inside first, crisp in black slacks and a tailored blazer, followed by a woman in a gray coat and soft pink scarf, her gait steady, her presence quiet but undeniable. Wendell looked up. Dana's voice cut the silence. "Apologies for the interruption, but I believe this audit is missing a rather crucial participant." She stepped aside. Dorothy Bell took one step forward. Alive, calm, very much uncremated. Marcus's chair squeaked as he stood abruptly. "What the—" His mouth hung open, color draining from his face. Derek's hands dropped from his folder like it had caught fire. Wendell stared in silence for 3 seconds before closing his laptop with a snap. "Ma'am," he said to Dorothy, standing, "can you please identify yourself?" She reached into her purse and calmly withdrew her government-issued ID, placing it on the table like a playing card. "Dorothy Louise Bell," she said. "Born June 12, 1957, never died, never gave permission to be buried, especially not on paper." Marcus's breathing grew shallow. This isn't she's... Dorothy turned toward him, her voice low and even. "You should have made sure I wasn't breathing before collecting my pension." The room went still. No sound but the distant clack of someone typing in the hallway outside. Wendell slowly sat back down. "Please be advised," he said to Marcus. "Any further statements made during this proceeding may be used in a criminal investigation. You are not currently under arrest, but your benefit access has been frozen pending formal review." Marcus didn't move. His eyes flicked between Wendell, Dana, and the woman he thought he'd buried. Dorothy didn't blink. She didn't need to. She had just come back from the dead to take her name and everything he stole back. The hearing chamber wasn't much more glamorous than the audit room. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs, and the sharp smell of toner from the copier down the hall. But it felt heavier, more charged. This was no longer about paperwork. This was official. Dorothy Bell sat on the left side of the room beside Dana, hands folded neatly over a soft leather folder that held her original living will. Her presence was quiet but thunderous. She wore the same gray coat, but had traded the soft scarf for a strand of pearls she hadn't worn since her retirement party. Across the aisle, Marcus Bell looked like he'd aged 5 years in 24 hours. His jaw was locked, and sweat had begun to gather along his collar. Beside him, Derek Wolfe kept his lips pressed in a tight line, trying to appear casual, but already shrinking under the fluorescent glare. At the front, Wendell Price adjusted the microphone on the table and opened the proceeding. This fraud hearing is pursuant to the SSA Internal Audit and Office of Inspector General's preliminary findings regarding fraudulent claims made under survivor benefits and pension disbursement, case file number 14109. He clicked a pen. Let the record show that Ms. Dorothy Bell, the individual previously listed as deceased in this matter, is alive and present in the room. Dorothy gave the smallest of nods. She didn't need to say it aloud. Her breath was louder than any document. Dana rose first. She moved like a blade, every word sharp and measured. On March 18th, Mr. Marcus Bell filed a survivor claim using a forged death certificate. We have verified that the certificate contains a falsified physician's name, a non-existent funeral home, and no burial or cremation record. This was supported by an online obituary posted by the defendant, without any medical verification or legal authority. She turned and gestured toward Dorothy. The woman he claimed had died is sitting right here, alive and in full possession of her faculties, her identification, and her living will, which I will submit into the record now. She passed the document to the clerk without ceremony. Wendell didn't blink. Noted. Proceed. Marcus shifted. Look, I thought she'd passed. We hadn't spoken. I was told. You filed for a pension 3 days after listing your own mother's death, Wendell said coolly. Did you speak to a physician, a coroner, any authority? I had the paperwork from someone. Derek handled the forms. All heads turned. Derek straightened like he'd been electrocuted. I didn't file anything. I just helped him prepare what he gave me. I didn't know it was fake. Dana didn't miss a beat. Mr. Wolfe notarized the forged certificate. He submitted routing information for pension dispersal to an account tied to his tax prep business. He filed the address change forms that rerouted all of Ms. Bell's government correspondence. Derek opened his mouth, closed it again. Marcus's voice cracked. He told me it was clean. No one in this room is clean, Wendell said, except the woman whose name you tried to profit from. A clerk entered quietly and passed Wendell a note. He read it once, then set it down. All financial accounts tied to the pension claim and life insurance withdrawal are frozen as of this morning. The Department of Treasury has been notified. Transactions after March 18th are being backtraced for restitution. Dana leaned closer to Dorothy and whispered, That's the net tightening. A few seats behind Dorothy, Tina Bell sat still, eyes forward, face unreadable. She'd been subpoenaed to appear and now waited for her name to be called. Wendell glanced toward her. Ms. Tina Bell, please confirm for the record, did you ever believe Dorothy Bell was actually deceased? Tina stood slowly, walked to the witness stand and took the oath. No, she said plainly. I didn't. He told me she was, but I didn't buy it. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to believe he could do something like this. But I knew it wasn't right. Dorothy watched her, heart heavy but unmoved. It was too late for apologies now, but not too late for the truth. As the hearing wound down, Wendell spoke directly to Dorothy. Ms. Bell, do you have anything else you'd like to submit into the record? She stood, calm and deliberate, and walked to the front of the room. I brought this, she said, holding up her living will. But more than that, I'd like the record to show that I had every intention of leaving my affairs in order when I was actually gone. What he tried to do wasn't just theft, it was erasure. She turned to look at Marcus directly. You were my son, but what you did to me, there's no inheritance that fixes it. Then she handed the will to Wendell and walked back to her seat. The hearing adjourned, but as people began to stand, Wendell held up a hand. I should make you all aware, he said, his voice even. We're forwarding this case to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation. There may be further subpoenas." He glanced at Marcus. "And potentially indictments." The call came at 8:43 a.m. on a Thursday. Dorothy had just sat down with a bowl of dry cereal. No milk, no sugar, just the way she liked it when the weather turned humid. Annie, her tabby, pawed lazily at the window screen as a garbage truck clanged down the block. The phone buzzed, flashing an unknown DC area code. She picked it up. Dorothy Bell. A voice on the other end was clinical but slightly awkward. A man, probably younger than Marcus. Probably too young to be calling someone to confirm their existence. "Ms. Bell, this is Nathaniel Drew with the State Department's Bureau of Vital Records and Federal Identity Verification Services." Mouthful, Dorothy thought. "Yes? We're reaching out in response to a federal audit involving a previously processed death certificate tied to your Social Security number. As part of our verification process, we're contacting you directly to confirm your living status." Dorothy let the silence hang for half a beat too long. Then she said flatly, "Still here. Would you like proof of breath?" The voice stammered. "No, ma'am. No need. We've received confirmation through multiple official channels. This is just a final step." She could hear him typing, notes being taken, her life resurrected through keystrokes. "We'll begin backdating corrections today," he continued. "Your records across federal and state systems will be amended. You should see your Medicare benefits reinstated within 48 hours. Direct deposit for pension accounts may take another 5 business days." "Back pay included?" Dorothy asked without hesitation. He paused, then cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. Retroactive to March 18th. Adjusted for standard cost of living increase." Dorothy's shoulders relaxed by a fraction. "Good. That was the day my son tried to turn me into a ghost." Dana showed up at her door before noon, a half-smile tugging at her face and a document folder in her hand. "Guess what I just filed?" Dorothy stepped aside. "Let me guess. Another fraud charge?" "Not today. This one's a civil claim. Emotional damages, denial of access to essential health care, willful misrepresentation of legal status, identity displacement, pension obstruction. The works." Dorothy raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like more pages than my first divorce." Dana grinned. "Also with better payout." They sat together at the kitchen table, this time not to gather proof, but to organize the next chapter. Restitution, civil damages, reputation rebuilding. Dorothy stared at the growing pile of forms and letters, most of them finally working for her instead of against her. "Do you know what it's like?" she asked quietly. "To have to convince people you're alive?" Dana didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled a small envelope from her purse and set it on the table. "Albany Public Radio," she said. "They heard about the hearing, asked if you'd do a segment on elder fraud. Anonymous, no names, just your voice." Dorothy's instinct was to laugh, but it caught in her throat. "I'm not a speaker," she said, shaking her head. "I'm a librarian. I catalog things. I keep quiet." Dana sipped her tea. "You're also a woman who was buried by her own son and clawed her way back through paper and silence. You don't need a podium, just a microphone." 3 days later, a quiet voice aired on local radio just after the weather report. It spoke about loss, not of life, but of autonomy, about what it means to be erased by someone you raised, about what it means to come back. It didn't give a name, but Joyce recognized it. So did the mailman, so did Tina, so did Marcus, listening from his lawyer's office, where he now had far more paperwork to explain than he ever expected. That night, Dorothy stood by her living room window, a check in one hand and a reinstatement letter in the other. The balance was larger than she expected. Her name was spelled right. No estate of. No late Dorothy Bell. Just her. Alive, real, and accounted for. The porch light flicked on automatically behind her. She turned away from the window and walked to her desk. A new list waited there, clean paper, fresh ink. Now that she had her name back, what else could she reclaim? The knock came just after sunrise. Derek Wolfe answered the door of his duplex in slippers and a wrinkled t-shirt, already annoyed before he even registered the badge. "Derek Wolfe?" the woman asked, her voice clipped and practiced. He squinted. Depends. Behind her, 2 agents stepped up the concrete steps in unison. You're under arrest for tax fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction of a federal investigation, she said flatly. You are being taken into custody by order of the IRS Criminal Division. He barely got out a what? Before they had him cuffed and turned around. But it wasn't the arrest that rattled Derek. It was what he said next. I can give you Marcus Bell? Joyce Richmond nearly dropped her morning coffee when she saw the news. There, in the Albany City Beat, tucked between a piece on budget cuts and a new sandwich shop, was a 2-paragraph article. Local tax advisor Derek Wolfe was taken into federal custody Tuesday morning in connection with an ongoing fraud and identity theft investigation. Unconfirmed sources report Wolfe has provided information to federal authorities about a former client currently under review for forged documentation tied to survivor benefits and pension disbursement. Joyce let out a long, slow breath and muttered, "Finally." She pulled on her robe, grabbed the paper, and headed straight to Dorothy's. Dorothy read the article in silence. She didn't need the details spelled out. She already knew the house of lies Marcus built was crumbling, and Derek had just kicked out one of the load-bearing walls. Joyce hovered near the window, arms crossed. So what happens now? He just gets caught in the rain like the rest of us? Not quite, Dorothy murmured. Now Dana steps in. At the legal clinic, Dana sat with 2 manila folders open in front of her and a look of total focus carved into her features. This is our shot, she said. If Derek's testimony checks out, Marcus will lose more than his pension claim. He'll lose his financial credibility, permanently. She flipped to a page marked with a red tab. I'm initiating formal asset seizure. We'll start with what's traceable. Bank accounts, tax returns, gift transfers. Then we'll move to anything that smells like a stash. Dorothy didn't flinch. He won't have much left after that, Dana added. He shouldn't. Dana paused, then offered a gentler tone. You don't have to go through his records yourself. But Dorothy shook her head. Number. If there's still anything with my name on it, I want to be the one who crosses it out. That afternoon, Tina stood at Dorothy's gate, eyes shadowed with something she hadn't let herself feel until now. Regret. I heard about Derek, she said. I wanted to come sooner, but I didn't know if you'd want that. Dorothy met her with a steady gaze. Why now? Tina swallowed. Because you were right. I should have said something when I first saw that obituary. I knew it was a lie. I didn't want the blowback. Not from Marcus. Not from anyone. Dorothy opened the gate slowly. You were afraid. Tina nodded. But you came anyway, Dorothy said. That matters. They sat on the porch steps like they used to, before the divorce, before everything rotted from the inside. Tina pulled something from her bag, a folded envelope. What's this? My statement, Tina said. If it helps with the asset case, you can give it to Dana. Dorothy took it, eyes misting slightly. She didn't say thank you. She just held it like it weighed more than it looked. That night, Dorothy sat alone in the quiet of her bedroom, her old will spread across the bed like a blueprint of forgotten intentions. She read every line, every name, every assumption she'd once made about who would outlive whom and who would honor what. She reached for a pen and began to write, To Joyce Richmond, I leave full power of attorney in the event of incapacity, for her loyalty and presence through the unthinkable. To Albany Literacy Project, I bequeath a portion of my retirement accounts to fund the voices that will never be silenced again. She drew a single, heavy line through Marcus Bell's name. To my son Marcus, I leave nothing, not because I have nothing to give, but because he already took what he could and returned nothing of himself. She signed it at the bottom, initialed every page, then placed the new document into her fireproof safe, right beside her reinstated Social Security card and a new photo taken just last week. Her life, reassembled page by page. Outside, a car idled at the end of the street. Marcus sat behind the wheel, engine running, watching the porch light flicker on. He hadn't told his lawyer he was driving by. He hadn't told anyone. Inside the house he once called his, a woman he used to call mother had just erased his future with a signature, and he had no idea what she would do next. The legal clinic smelled like toner and quiet vengeance. Dorothy sat beside Dana in a back office where the blinds were drawn tight and a portable fan hummed against the August heat. On the table between them lay a thick folder marked in red, BELLMARCUSTDOTSIGNATURIFICATIONFILE. Dana didn't speak right away. She wanted the silence to carry weight. Then, without looking up, she said, "We got it." Dorothy folded her hands in her lap. "How many?" Dana opened the folder, revealing 12 photocopies, beneficiary forms, address change requests, life insurance withdrawals, a notarized letter requesting early pension access. "All forged," Dana said. "He used variations, but the handwriting analyst confirmed what we suspected. No two signatures were consistent, and none of them match yours." Dorothy looked at the stack like it was radioactive. "I don't even write cursive anymore," she muttered. "Hasn't been mine in years." Dana turned a page. "This one really sealed it." She pointed to a retirement disbursement form from 4 months ago, where Dorothy's name had been signed with a distinctive loop on the D. That flourish? "It's from a template, a handwriting sample from a signature generator. You can literally buy this crap online." Dorothy's mouth flattened into a line. Of course he would. Wendell's call came 20 minutes later. His voice was as dry and direct as ever. "The DOJ has agreed to proceed with formal criminal charges," he said. "Wire fraud, identity theft, government benefit fraud, possibly more, depending on the financial trail we complete with Treasury." He paused, just long enough to let it sink in. "He's going to be indicted." Dorothy closed her eyes. The word didn't make her feel triumphant. It made her feel clean, like air returning after months underground. "Thank you," she said, "for not looking away." "I don't do sympathy, Ms. Bell," Wendell said, "but I do truth, and yours is finally out." The next morning, Dorothy stood in the cool air outside Rest Haven Cemetery, the wrought iron gates creaking as she pushed through. She walked the path slowly, past familiar stones, until she reached the Bell family plot. Her parents, her husband Albert, and the empty space beside him, reserved since 1988, her name already etched faintly into the granite, waiting for the date that would someday follow. She looked at it for a long time. Then she turned and walked back to the grounds office. 2 hours later, Marcus received an overnighted letter by courier. Legal exclusion from family interment rights. He tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a notarized document stating that he, Marcus T. Bell, had been permanently barred from all access, decision-making authority, or involvement in the Bell family burial plot, under protective order granted by the county probate judge. His signature had been forged. Now hers had locked him out, for good. That evening, Dorothy's landline rang just after dinner. The caller ID read, "Blocked." She let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, the message blinked. She stood there staring at it, hands dry, spine still. Then she hit play. "Mom, I don't even know what to say. I messed up. I did. I know that. But I didn't think it would go this far. I was desperate. I lost my job. Tina was threatening to take the kids. I thought it'd be easy, quick, just some money to fix everything. But you weren't supposed to get hurt. I swear to God you weren't supposed to know. I didn't want this. I'm sorry, Mom. Please call me back." The recording ended. Dorothy didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply deleted the message. Later that night, Dana slid a draft order across the kitchen table. Restraining order, permanent inheritance disqualification, preemptive guardianship nullification. "If anything happens to you," she said, "this ensures he doesn't get a cent. Not your house, not your accounts, not even your cat." Dorothy signed without hesitation. "I'd rather leave it all to the wind," she said, "than let it blow into his hands." Dana watched her for a moment. "You're locking him out of everything." Dorothy folded the paper neatly and placed it in her file. "No," she said softly. "He did that himself." At the edge of town, Marcus sat in a pay-by-week motel, the yellow light overhead flickering like an insult. He looked around the room. half a suitcase, 2 empty soda cans, and a folder filled with denials from banks, employers, even friends. No account access, no credit, no trust, not even a place to die beside the family that once bore his name. The bank sent the statement in a padded envelope. It arrived in a thick white packet with a blue tab that read, "Confidential, disbursement summary attached." Dorothy didn't open it right away. She placed it on the kitchen counter, beside the coffee maker and a bowl of pears, and stared at it while the kettle boiled. The envelope seemed heavier than it should have been, as if it didn't just contain numbers, but choices. Bad ones. She poured her tea. Saturday opened it. Inside was a spreadsheet, 12 pages long, each transaction listed in black font under her name, only now they weren't hers. $4,328, luxury watch boutique, Midtown Manhattan. $1,800, online sportsbook deposit, flagged and reversed. $3,200, high-end audio equipment, shipped to an address in Shroon Lake. $9,750, wire transfer to an untraceable fintech wallet. $639, steakhouse dinner for 2, Valentine's Day. Dorothy read every line in silence, not because she didn't understand them, but because she did. Marcus hadn't used the money for survival. He hadn't used it to get back on his feet. He'd used it to live out a version of his life where she no longer existed, where he could spend freely, recklessly, because she was gone. She slid the stack across the table toward Dana. "Can we claw any of it back?" Dana shook her head. "Not all. Some vendors have already responded to the Treasury's hold and frozen transactions, but most of what he spent is gone. Vapor, gambling, gifts, online transfers. But," she turned a page, "we do have access to the restitution pool if you want it back." Dorothy sat back, eyes distant, then said evenly, "I don't want it back." Dana blinked. "Excuse me?" Dorothy reached for a yellow notepad, began to write. Albany Public Library Foundation, Hudson River Literacy Outreach, Books Before Bail, Women's Literacy Project. "Can we reroute the payout?" Dana slowly nodded. "You want to donate the money?" "No," Dorothy said. "I want to repurpose it." She circled the last name on the list. "Let this go where words still matter. He tried to erase mine. I'd rather fund others learning to use theirs." A week later, Joyce knocked on the door with a poster rolled under her arm and a plastic crate full of blank name tags. "You're gonna hate me," she grinned, "but I signed you up to speak." Dorothy raised a brow. "Speak where?" "At the donation kickoff. They're doing a little Literacy Lives night. Finger food, some state reps, and your name's on the banner, so you better show up." Dorothy opened the poster. At the top was a quote printed in bold. She didn't just survive being erased, she rewrote the page. "In honor of Dorothy Bell." She didn't smile, not fully, but her eyes welled. "I'll show up," she said, "but you're standing beside me." Joyce waved her off. "Fine, but I'm not wearing heels." Meanwhile, across town, Tina Bell sat at her kitchen table with a glass of seltzer and a yellow envelope. She had rewritten her court letter 3 times already. But the words finally settled. "To whom it may concern, he lied. She lived." That's all you need to know. But if you need more, Marcus Bell knew his mother was alive when he filed that claim. "I saw her name on letters, on cards, on bills. I ignored it. I didn't speak up. I should have. She didn't deserve what he did. And she sure as hell didn't deserve silence from the rest of us. Please consider this my official testimony and apology." Tina sealed it, addressed it to Dana's office, then sat for a long time at her kitchen table before exhaling like she hadn't in years. At the state restitution hearing 2 weeks later, Dana submitted the final paperwork. 26 pages, not a word wasted. Restitution request, approved. Funds, rerouted. Statement, entered into the record. It was done. That night, Dorothy walked through the Albany Public Library's West Wing with Joyce at her side. It smelled like old wood, fresh print, and faint citrus from the janitor's mop. Her name hung from a foam core sign near the welcome table. A child with thick glasses and a glittery pencil asked her, "Did you write a book?" Dorothy smiled. Not yet, but I lived one. Far away in a motel with no Wi-Fi and a busted air conditioner, Marcus found a letter addressed to his name in plain black font. He opened it, thinking it might be legal. Instead, it was just a printout of a donation receipt, in honor of Dorothy Bell, formerly erased, now fully funded. Below it, 3 literacy nonprofits and the total Marcus had stolen, reclaimed, reallocated, and tax reported in full. He crumpled the paper but couldn't bring himself to throw it away. The courtroom was colder than Dorothy expected. Not physically, it was midsummer and the AC barely worked, but something in the air carried a chill. The kind of chill that came from paper stacked high and a dozen strangers watching with the weight of law behind their eyes. She sat in the witness box, composed, her gray coat folded neatly over her lap. The court stenographer adjusted her keys. A bailiff shifted beside the wall. Dana stood nearby, hands clasped in front of her like she wasn't holding anything, but she was holding everything. Across the aisle, Marcus sat hunched at the defense table, clean-shaven, suit too big in the shoulders. He hadn't looked at her once. Dorothy didn't need him to. The prosecutor spoke first. Ms. Bell, can you describe the moment you found out your son had listed you as deceased? Dorothy took a slow breath, not for nerves, but for control. I received a letter from Medicare denying my prescription coverage. It said I was deceased. At first I thought it was a clerical error. She looked at the jury. 6 women, 6 men, one alternately weeping and angry. But then I called Social Security and they confirmed it. That's when I realized my son hadn't just abandoned me, he'd replaced me. The room didn't move. The prosecutor nodded. Did you ever give Marcus Bell permission to access your pension accounts or file any claims on your behalf? No. Did you ever give him power of attorney? Never. Did you know he had submitted a death certificate? I was unaware until it appeared in the audit. Would you recognize that certificate? I would. He held it up. This the one? Dorothy nodded. Yes. That's the document he used to bury me on paper. There was a faint gasp in the gallery. No one hushed it. Next, Dana took the floor. She moved like wind through tall grass, quiet, confident, and cutting only when necessary. She displayed the audit trail on a projector, login records from Marcus's devices, time-stamped submissions to SSA, life insurance withdrawals, pension fund transfers, every click, every forgery. Then she pulled out the signature analysis blown up on a foam board. This is Ms. Bell's actual signature on a library check from last year, and this, she pointed to a swirled mess on a pension claim, is what Mr. Bell submitted. We traced it back to an online signature generator used for identity fraud tutorials. The jury shifted, murmurs rising. Dana didn't look at Marcus, but Marcus finally looked at her, and then away. Wendell Price took the stand next. He wore his usual charcoal gray suit and answered every question without inflection. Just facts. Just process. I conducted the audit after a fraud alert was filed through SSA and the Office of Inspector General. Upon review, the documents submitted were inconsistent with protocol and contained falsified credentials. And how did you verify Ms. Bell's identity? The prosecutor asked. Face to face, she walked into the audit room. With identification, breathing, fully alive. Laughter rippled briefly through the courtroom. Even the judge smiled, then covered it with his hand. As Dorothy prepared to leave the witness box, the judge looked up. Anything else you'd like to say, Ms. Bell? She stood for a moment in silence, then turned to the jury. He didn't make a mistake, she said softly. He didn't panic. He didn't act in a moment of desperation. Her voice didn't waver. He knew I was alive. He just didn't care. The room froze. Marcus flinched, and finally, he looked at her. But Dorothy was already sitting down again. Deliberation lasted 4 hours. The foreman didn't even look nervous as he stood. On all counts, wire fraud, identity theft, falsification of federal records, and criminal misrepresentation, we find the defendant guilty. Marcus didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just stared ahead like maybe this, too, was something he could survive. He was wrong. As the bailiff moved to escort Marcus from the courtroom, Dorothy watched him go without rising. She didn't wave, didn't speak. But when he passed her row, close enough to hear, she whispered one sentence, barely louder than breath. "Now the world knows who you are." He blinked and kept walking. The podium was made of cheap plexiglass, and the microphone squeaked when the moderator tapped it, but none of that mattered. Dorothy stood behind it anyway, posture steady, notes folded in half inside her blazer pocket, untouched. The Albany Regional Conference on Elder Fraud wasn't glamorous. It was held in a hotel ballroom that still smelled faintly of last week's wedding buffet. The carpeting was a paisley mess, and the coffee was bitter. But every seat in the room was full. Attendees ranged from social workers and legal aides to quietly weeping seniors gripping folders in their laps, the edges dog-eared from months of trying to be heard. Dorothy Bell cleared her throat, adjusted the mic, and began. "I was declared dead without dying." A pause. Soft laughter in the room, but nervous, unsure of where the story was going. 6 months later, I walked into a federal building with my lawyer and my ID, alive, unapologetic, angry. She let that sit, then leaned forward. "Never let anyone bury you while you're breathing." This time, no one laughed. She told the room about the letter, the audit, the hearing. Her voice never cracked, but it didn't need to. The steel was in the silence between her sentences. "I didn't come here for sympathy," she added. "I came to remind you that what they steal from us, our names, our accounts, our credibility, isn't permanent. What we take back, that's what lasts." In the front row, Dana sat in her usual all-black suit, arms folded, a soft smirk at the corner of her lips. Next to her, Joyce wore a lavender blouse and a proud fraud survivor advocate pin that someone had handed her at the registration desk. She whispered, "She's killing it," and elbowed Dana lightly. Dana just nodded. She always does. After the applause, long-standing, deeply earned, people began lining up near the stage. Some wanted hugs, some just pressed their hands over Dorothy's and said nothing at all. One man handed her a folded note. "I haven't told anyone what happened to me yet, but now I will." Another woman clutched a folder labeled, "Help Me," and wept into Dorothy's shoulder. No media, no cameras, just the quiet exchange of pain and the start of something new. Outside the ballroom, Tina waited with her arms crossed, but her face was soft, uncertain. When Dorothy emerged, she stepped forward without a word and hugged her. Tight, real. "You didn't deserve this," Tina whispered into her ear. "But you showed us what justice looks like." Dorothy held on a second longer than she thought she would, then stepped back and nodded. "No more silence," she said. "Not from me. Not from any of us." That Monday, a short write-up appeared in the New York State Office of Elder Justice Monthly, a bulletin most people never read, but one that sat on every courthouse break room coffee table. The headline was quiet but sharp. "Albany survivor turns paper death into living testimony." It detailed the fraud, the audit, the trial, the donations, and it ended with a quote, "Her name wasn't just cleared, it was claimed, and now she uses it to help others do the same." 2 weeks later, Dorothy sat in the basement of a community center, facing a half circle of folding chairs. 6 women, 2 men, all over 60, all clutching binders and half-filled forms, all with stories of sons, nieces, scammers, and betrayal. Dorothy set down her coffee, smiled gently. "Let's start with your names," she said, "and let's say them like they matter." Outside, a light breeze rustled the trees on the block. In a parked sedan across the street, a reporter sat with a notebook and a recorder. She hadn't approached Dorothy yet, but she would. Because some stories start with a crime, and some with a woman who decided not to stay buried. The message came in at 2:14 a.m. Dorothy saw the missed call when she went to silence her phone for the night, just a single notification flashing like an afterthought. Blocked caller, 1 new voicemail. She knew who it was before she pressed play. His voice came through fractured, trembling. "Mom, I know I have no right, none, but I'm asking anyway. I messed up. I ruined everything. I see that now. I I thought I was drowning. I thought it wouldn't hurt anyone. I thought you wouldn't know." A long pause. "You were the only one who ever saw me, the only person who ever really gave a damn if I made it or not. I was angry. I was stupid. But I never hated you. I swear. I never hated you." More silence. Then, "I don't want money. I just want my mother back. Please, if there's anything left, please, call me." Dorothy stood in the kitchen, hands braced on the counter, listening as the call ended and the phone returned to stillness. She didn't cry. Instead, she poured a glass of water and stood by the sink, watching the moon carve its way across the backyard. Then she opened her voicemail and deleted the message. Dana arrived later that morning, hair damp from the humidity, court bag slung over one shoulder. Dorothy didn't wait for tea or pleasantries. She handed her a manila folder. "What's this?" Dana asked. "A trust," Dorothy said, "for Darlene's grandson, Elijah." Dana's eyebrows lifted. "The one with the cochlear implant?" Dorothy nodded. "He turns 10 next week. Smart as a whip, but his mom works 2 jobs and Medicaid's been playing games with his speech therapy coverage." Dana flipped through the file, account ledgers, medical notes, an affidavit from Darlene. "This is airtight," she said, "and generous." Dorothy gave a small shrug. "Legacy shouldn't be about blood. It should be about direction. He's going somewhere. I want to help make sure no one detours him." Dana pulled a pen from her jacket pocket and tapped the top of the file. "You're sure?" Dorothy met her gaze. "Marcus made his decisions. This one's mine." They sat at the table where so much had begun. Forms, folders, names crossed out and written back in. Dana opened her laptop and typed. "Final filings," she said. "I'll close the fraud claim, update your estate, and transfer the remainder of your restitution to the trust fund. You'll get confirmation within the week." Dorothy nodded, then pulled a slip of paper from her pocket and laid it on top of the folder. A single sentence, handwritten in firm script. "This is what legacy looks like. Not theft, but teaching." Dana read it, sat with it, then tucked it into the file. "You want me to add this to your estate notes?" she asked. Dorothy shook her head. "Number, I want you to give it to Elijah when he's old enough to understand what it means." That evening, Dorothy stepped out onto her porch with a glass of iced tea and the silence of a woman who had survived everything and wasn't haunted by any of it. Joyce wandered up the walk with a canvas tote bag and her usual dramatic flair. "You dodged my texts, so I figured I'd come in person." "I was just thinking," Dorothy said. "About what?" She stared off toward the edge of the street, where the sunset bent low over the trees. "How easy it is to let people back in just because they say the right words, even when nothing's changed." Joyce nodded slowly. "He called?" Dorothy didn't answer directly. "I listened. That's enough." Joyce sat beside her, pulling 2 peach scones from the bag like peace offerings. "You don't owe anyone grace just because they're ashamed?" "No," Dorothy said, "but I owe myself peace." She took a bite of the scone, sweet and warm, closed her eyes. In a drawer inside the house, her voicemail inbox was empty. Her will was final. Her name, restored. And outside, the wind carried the smell of cut grass and something else, too. The sharp scent of new pages waiting to be written. The doorbell didn't chime anymore. It sang. Dorothy replaced the old, cracked buzzer with a hand-painted sign. "Welcome, no appointment necessary." Her front room, the same one where she'd once held her breath opening a Medicare denial, had been cleared of doilies and silence. Now it held bookshelves, flyers, a kettle that rarely had time to cool. In the far corner, a corkboard read, "Tell your story. We're listening." Pushpins glinted in the morning light. It started small. A neighbor's daughter came by to ask about resumes. Then 2 seniors from the local Meals on Wheels circuit stopped in to charge a phone and stayed to talk. Word spread, quietly, organically, like moss growing back after a burn. Dorothy didn't call it a center, she called it a house, because it still was, just reimagined. The back den became a reading nook, with deep chairs and a basket of eyeglasses for anyone who forgot theirs. The formal dining room, never formal, not really, was now a long shared table where teens scribbled essays beside retirees updating their voter registration. The old guest room was now the quiet room, for anyone who needed space to breathe, cry, write, or just sit without being asked why. And the garage? That was Joyce's domain. Every Thursday, she rolled up the door, set out card tables, and ran what she insisted on calling office hours for the disillusioned. She helped with everything from digital passwords to printing birth certificates. "Grief is a full-time job," she said more than once while laminating someone's emergency contacts list. "We just give it a coffee break." Dorothy didn't hover. She floated, refilling mugs, pointing to the Wi-Fi password, recommending books like The Color of Water or The Year of Magical Thinking to whoever looked like they were carrying more than their share. One afternoon, Dana arrived with her niece in tow, bright-eyed, notebook in hand, already asking questions before she got past the front steps. "Why doesn't this place have a name?" the girl asked. Dorothy smiled. "Because sometimes naming something gives it limits." The girl blinked. "That's kind of cool." Dana chuckled and pulled her into the converted library room. "You'll learn that Miss Bell is full of poetic loopholes." They stayed for an hour, maybe more. And when they left, Dorothy noticed a napkin folded neatly beside the return bin. Scrawled on it in pencil, "When I grow up, I want to be someone like you." She tucked it into her desk drawer, right beside the final trust documents and a photo of Elijah smiling with a new reading tablet in his lap. The plaque arrived 1 week later. Joyce had it commissioned in secret. Brass, gently burnished, with curled corners that matched the filigree of Dorothy's porch railings. They hung it just to the right of the front door, beside the chime, in honor of Dorothy Bell, who refused to stay buried, and built something that couldn't be stolen. Dorothy ran her fingers over it as the sun dipped low, casting gold across the yard. Down the block, kids rode scooters. A woman she didn't know yet carried a canvas bag of forms up her walkway. Inside, the lights were warm. The floor creaked the way it always had. But for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a hiding place. It felt like a pulse, like a name spoken aloud. And yet, miles away in a dim basement office, someone flipped open a laptop under another person's name, typed in a date of birth they'd never lived, began filling out a form, a familiar form, a death certificate. Different city, different target, but the same game. And that sound Dorothy had come to recognize more than any other? Paper, moving across a desk like a whisper trying to become a lie. Her story was about to matter all over again. The producer had told her to wear something soft in color and firm in spirit. Dorothy chose a slate blue blouse and her strand of pearls, the ones from her retirement party, the ones she hadn't worn since the hearing. She pressed them flat against her collarbone as she settled into the small recording booth at WAMC Northeast Public Radio. It was just her, a microphone, and a host named Rachel with kind eyes and a voice that moved like warm wind through brittle grass. "This is State Voices, and today's story isn't about fraud," Rachel began. "It's about reclamation. It's about how one woman came back from a kind of erasure few people can imagine and built something better in the space where she was nearly forgotten." A soft chime. The mic light turned red. Rachel leaned forward. "Dorothy Bell, thank you for being here." Dorothy smiled faintly. "Thank you for seeing me." The questions started gently. How did it begin? What did it feel like to be told you were dead on paper? How do you prove something so obvious? Dorothy's voice stayed even, clear, no tremor. "I wasn't angry at first," she said. "I was numb. You go your whole life being responsible, filling out forms, updating your address, paying bills on time. Then one day, someone decides you don't exist anymore, and you have to convince the government that you still wake up every morning." She let that settle, then added, "What they take from you isn't just money or records. It's certainty, your name, your place in the world." Rachel paused. "And yet, here you are." Dorothy smiled again. "I learned something. Your death certificate doesn't define your ending. Your decisions do." The red light clicked off. Rachel reached across the table. "That line alone. People will carry that with them." Dorothy nodded, quiet but satisfied. "That's the point." That evening, the house filled with light and voices. Dana brought a bottle of Pinot Noir and a stack of forms she never even opened. Tina arrived with a warm peach cobbler and an apology for how long it had taken her to bring it. Joyce wore a t-shirt that read, "I survived someone else's plan," and claimed she'd had it custom-made. The dining room buzzed with the rhythm of real life. Silverware clinking, someone laughing too loud, Joyce accusing Dana of hoarding the good napkins again. Dorothy sat at the head of the table, not in control, not in command, just present, seen. She set down her wineglass and looked out the window. The sun had just dropped past the rooftops, but the house still glowed, from within. The porch light buzzed faintly. Candles flickered in corners. Children's hand-drawn flyers for weekend tutoring sessions fluttered on the corkboard near the door. She didn't say anything for a long while. She just listened. To life, to the hum of purpose where silence once lived. Across the room, near the doorway, a small frame hung low on the wall, eye level for anyone walking in. Inside it, a crisp reissued Social Security card. Her name, her number, her life, nothing missing, nothing stolen, no prefix like late or the estate of, just Dorothy Elaine Bell. And beneath it, the line she had written for herself on a night when everything felt uncertain but her resolve. He declared me dead, but I walked into the room and rewrote the ending.